So we are here today with Lisa Badger, who is seeking one of the 3 open seats on the Springfield Park Board in the April 2nd election. We appreciate you being here today and invite you to provide an opening statement about why you are seeking this office.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the time and consideration. I am running for Park District Board for a few reasons. The main reason is that I do want to serve within my community. This is a volunteer position, obviously, so there's no real financial incentive or anything like that associated. It's basically because I care about my community, and I do volunteer in my community and spend time in my community and want it to be the best that it can be. Another reason that I'm running is I would like a diverse representation on the board. I am the only female candidate running, and while I don't believe you should vote for me simply because I am a female, I am qualified. And with Sangamon County having about 52% of female population, I do feel as though in order to be properly represented, that is one of the demographics that should be represented. Also, I live in one of the older neighborhoods in town, which is Harvard Park. I've lived on the south side of town for most of my life, and so I would like to see people from all areas of the city represented on the park board.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your professional background and how that experience would be a benefit if you were elected to the park board.
Okay. Currently, I work as a community affairs specialist for the Illinois State Treasurer. What that means is I go into communities all throughout Illinois and I promote programs of the State Treasurer's office. So I'm in daily contact with constituents from all over the state. And with that, I'm not only able to promote all of our programs, but I'm able to elicit feedback and listen to constituents from all areas. That's my current position. I also have background as a nurse, which also makes me a very good listener and able to be there for people and help them through maybe situations and able to educate them on situations that they find themselves in. Part of my nursing background is in pediatric nursing, so I do have a love for children and play and interaction with them. That is something that I don't get to do necessarily on a daily basis in my current role always professionally, but it is something that I greatly enjoy.
So the Park District does a lot on its website. It said it oversees 35 parks, 23 miles of bike trails, 4 golf courses, the zoo, the Nelson Center, and offers a variety of educational, recreational programs, classes, athletics. What do you think the average Springfield resident doesn't know about the Park District that you wish they did?
The first thing that I don't think that they really realize about the Park District is how much tax revenue comes from the community. So about over $12.8 million of tax revenue is in the current Park District budget, and I don't think that people realize that combined with the other monies in the budget total a budget of over $20 million. In talking to people in the community, that has been very surprising, is the reaction that I've gotten from a lot of people.
That it's that amount?
That it's that high.
Okay. In other communities, parks fall under the purview of the municipality. It was that way here once as well. Since you're running for a seat on Park Board, I'm going to assume you think this is that it should be separate from the city. So talk to us about why you think the current arrangement makes the most sense for Springfield residents.
Well, it is a separate entity. While it is a separate entity, I think that there should be partnerships, and I think that government agencies should all work together and share resources as much as possible. That doesn't necessarily always mean money by resources, but ideas, partnerships to reach as many people in the community as possible and offer programs. I do that in my daily work now. I work with other state agencies very often, other elected officials, other social service agencies. And I think that that is something that would be a positive on the park board.
How do you think the park board works with the city right now in particular?
I know that while the park board does have its own police force, the Springfield Police Department does patrol the parks. So that's one way that they do work together. I think that there could be an opportunity for additional things. I believe that some of the issues that face the city also face the park district, with the parks and park district itself being within the city.
Okay.
So I think that kind of bridging those things together would be a positive.
Are there specific areas you could see the additional opportunities?
One of the things that I've heard repeated oftentimes in mayoral forums and aldermanic forums and neighborhood associations that I've spoken with have been community relations with the police. And being as that we do have our own police agency within the park district, I think that we also have the opportunity to bridge positive communication with the public. One thing that I would like to see is cops and bobbers, where maybe Springfield Police and even, city, county, state, and the park district police can work with the kids and go fishing at Dreamland Park and foster some trust and good community fellowship.
You mentioned the police department. So in the past, the park district's police force has been criticized for being trouble. There was a report in, I think, late 2015. It talked about deficiencies in record keeping equipment, staffing, training. Do you think the district has addressed all those issues?
I think that they have been addressed. I think from what I know, a lot of those issues have at least been approached. I believe in transparency in government, so I do believe that if there are any questions regarding anything with budgetary, any particular aspect of the district, that should be transparent to the public. I'm not aware of any current issues, so once I am hopefully voted in and able to directly have access to some of those numbers and records, I hope to be able to learn more.
Okay. So let's say you are elected to the board. What do you see as the most pressing issues facing the district, and how would you work to address them?
I think the current most pressing issue is the preschool and the park issue. I came home last week and I had emails and Facebook messages and Facebook posts from concerned parents who were notified that day that the preschool and the park is closing. That was the first notice that I had heard of it either. And with preschools having very long waiting lists, mm-hmm. and then finances obviously being a part of a family budget to budget for those things, parents are very concerned. So I think that is the thing that is really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. I do think that transparency is always something that everyone should be concerned about. There are budget numbers available, but not necessarily line item budgets to the public. And I have heard time and time again that the public would like to be more involved with the park district and to be able to have their voices heard and their say in decisions that their tax money is being spent on.
Okay. Do you think it should stay open then, or where are you in the process of this particular issue?
I have not gathered all of the facts.
Okay.
It's still pretty early from a week ago when the notice came out. I was at the park board meeting that a lot of the parents and media and so forth attended. And I think that the first steps have been taken, and that is that the parents have specific questions. And I think that some of those questions are being answered. I do know some of the parents have filed FOIA requests, and so I do hope that some of the information that they're seeking is more readily available to them soon.
Okay.
Is there a principle or a rule of thumb that you would use to weigh in on a tough decision like that one?
In regards to that particular decision, I'm concerned that maybe the cart was put in front of the horse a little bit. The letter was given to parents that this decision has been made, and to my knowledge, the park board itself had not weighed in on it. It was to be a recommendation to the board as part of the budget, which is upcoming. So that would be something that I am hoping that would be appropriately addressed, where if the park district employees, the executive director, director of marketing, and so on, have specific recommendations, that will be voiced to the park board prior to public notifications to constituents and people who are using those services.
Yeah, I understand. I think the thing I was getting more to was with your background and, and love for children, and would you be more inclined to continue the program in light of diminishing resources? Or be more inclined to say, man, we need to watch our budget.
Sure.
This needs to.
Sure. I have not been privy to any budgetary line items regarding the preschool and the park specifically. Right. So I know just about what the public knows and what's been released to the public, parents, and, to my knowledge, the media. At this point, I do not believe in a reduction in government services without good reason. So unless I'm seeing that this is, a substantial drain on resources and money, I would be inclined to leave it open. It's been there for almost 50 years. It's the only true public preschool in the area, with the exception of District 186, which that is only for those who are in the district guidelines. So at this point, I'm inclined to leave it open, but we are still gathering information.
Good, thanks.
Another area board members would routinely get is the budget. You mentioned the preschool will be part of the budget discussion that's coming up. I guess if you were a board member, how would you approach the annual budget process? Are you line by line? Are you talking to people? What would be your process when faced with the budget?
Well, I think gathering information is the most important process of it. Like I mentioned, the budget is published online, but that is more of a comprehensive. It's not a line item. So, for example, it says $75,000 for marketing. So, what did we spend $75,000 on?
Sure. Okay. Do you think the Park District's programs are affordable right now for the average?
I think that many of them are.
Okay.
Obviously, the parks, and we have many of them, are free to the public. And so that in itself is affordable, free's good. I do think that there are ways that some families cannot afford club leagues and things like that. Sure. For recreational sports for children, volleyball, baseball, traveling teams where you have to travel out of state and pay for hotels. So I would like to make sure that we are looking at the possibility of having programs available that are affordable, memberships for students and things like that are affordable to the average family.
Okay. Staying with the budget for a minute here, some of the decisions or some constraints in the budget would be things the board doesn't necessarily, or the district doesn't necessarily put on itself. I'm particularly thinking of the minimum wage that the legislature just passed. What effect do you think that's going to have on the district?
Once again, I'm not privy to a lot of information yet. It's just right now I'm a member of the public. So being that the minimum wage is a gradual process, I don't foresee it being a large hit or anything that is going to be detrimental in the near future. I think that we will always need to make sure that our, profit and loss line items are aligned, that we're looking at those things closely.
Okay. You talked about a minute ago just how much the park offers. Do you think the park district should expand? Like if there was more land, do you think more parks should come?
I want to make sure that we're paying attention to the existing parks that we have. We have some fantastic parks that have been here since, I believe, Isles Park was established in either 1903 or 1905. It's on one of the main thoroughfares into the city. It has been renovated with the pickleball courts and with some state agencies moving over there as well, that is becoming even more heavily trafficked and utilized. So I want to make sure that we are paying attention to those existing parks. Isles Park, Lincoln Park, Washington Park, they're all great parks that are fairly old. I mean, they're, 120 years old, and they need to have resources in place allocated to them to make sure that they're clean, they're safe, and they're accessible. At this time, I would not say that we necessarily need to expand our parks, but I do know that as part of the comprehensive plan down the road, there is talk of annexing additional properties onto. So for example, at Isles Park, there is what is now currently a concrete slab where a business used to be, and I believe there's talks right now of expanding that area over to maybe have an additional skate park for skateboarders in town. So as long as it's feasible, it makes sense, but I do want to make sure that our existing facilities are taken care of.
So kind of in line with that, as subdivisions are developed, oftentimes there's a neighborhood park that's built in. And what's your sense of that? Should the park district be involved with those, take over ownership of those, or?
I definitely think it's a discussion worth having with developers as the city expands. I know with Centennial Park, which is one of the newer parks and newer subdivisions in the city, I've heard sentiments that people would like additional services there, but there's no water lines. So that would be a conversation that would definitely be worth having with developers in the future. If we are developing subdivisions and areas as a sprawl in the urban area continues, I think that those are conversations that should happen and take into account things like water lines in Centennial Park.
The park also runs the zoo. December 2011, the park board adopted a master plan for the zoo. I guess, do you see more changes that need to be made, more in that plan that needs to be acted, or anything else you'd like to see at the zoo? Just talk to us about which you'd like there.
I'd like to see more traffic at the zoo. I hear very often that people go to the Peoria, Bloomington, St. Louis. There's a lot of great zoos in the area within a drivable distance. And so I'd like people to stay here and go to the zoo as much as possible. So if that means that we need to look at our marketing dollars and make sure that people are aware, and maybe even people come here from other places, and that the attractions are up to standard and competitive with other areas. I think that the zoo is a valuable resource. I do think that it can be expensive. So I want to make sure that we are maximizing our exposure and our attractions, not only for residents that live in Springfield within the park district, but for surrounding areas as well.
How do you think that could be done, like getting those outside people who don't live here, who aren't aware of the zoo?
I think marketing is something that should be examined. I've heard from other park board members and employees that they work on marketing heavily, and so I'd like to see where those marketing dollars are directed and if it's getting a return on their dollar.
Okay. Could you see, we were talking earlier about partnerships with the city. Is there a chance there? They have their visitors and convention tourism
Absolutely.
bureau.
I think with the Tourism Bureau with the city, as we're drawing in conventions, as we're drawing in people to the other historical landmarks, are they aware that there's other offerings besides Lincoln's Home and Lincoln's Museum? Springfield has a really great opportunity of having some really great historical anchors. And that includes some of the parks that have been here for a long time. So can we tie all of that in together? So when people are going to Lincoln's Tomb and Oak Ridge Cemetery, can they also go to Lincoln Park and explore that? I think that there's a really great opportunity for partnerships with a lot of different agencies to make sure that visitors here are also getting the most bang for their buck. And then they go home and they tell their friends that, these are all of the things we did in Great Springfield, Illinois.
A partnership that may be on the more immediate horizon is the bike share program with the university, the city, and maybe possibly the Park District. Your thoughts on that?
I have not seen any figures associated with that. I know that the city council is in favor of it. What I would like to see is the Park District partner up more with the university students. So if that is a thing that would help with the UIS students who are here from all over to utilize the parks, then I'm all for it. Once again, it's hard to say yay or nay on things without looking at specifics. But if it is something that can help bring attention and traffic to the parks and utilization of the resources we have, then I think it's definitely a program worth looking into.
How safe do you think the parks are? The facilities, the parks, there was some vandalism last year, in particular with the pickleball courts. But talk to us how you feel about safety in the parks.
I have not heard a large sentiment from people that I have talked to that they feel unsafe in parks. Some of the safety issues that I have heard about are from people when I've been knocking on doors and out in the community is things like the sidewalks, infrastructure, trails and sidewalks that are not paved well and they're not accessible by people who are maybe older or have a disability. So that is a safety issue that I'm concerned about and that I keep my eye on as having my nursing license. I've also heard things and seen pictures from people where bleachers at baseball fields have nails or screws running up through them, or the wood is splintered. So I would like to make sure that any labor that is done, any work that is done in a safe manner so no one is hurt. I did hear from a woman, I believe it was late last week, that brought up the vandalism at the concession stands at the ball fields. And so her concern was that the area wasn't being patrolled quite enough to prevent that vandalism. So I think that it is an obvious point to make that we should make sure that Park District and city patrols are patrolling efficiently to prevent and deter things from happening. I don't feel as though people feel unsafe, but there are pockets of occurrences that do happen that I would hope that we can prevent as much as possible.
What prevention steps would you see?
Well, I would like to see patrols.
Patrols, okay.
Yeah, making sure that they're patrolling effectively. And then, if we do have these repeat occurrences of vandalism, do we need to look into other technologies to maybe deter and look for ways if offenders are creating problems to hold them accountable?
Okay. Going back to money for a second here. Mm-hmm. The city has a number of TIF districts, which obviously help provide incentives for economic development, but the flip side is taxing entities like the Park District could then conceivably lose money or not receive as much money as they would if a TIF didn't exist. The Park District has spoken out against some at times, most recently the Lumber Lane one. What do you think of the use of TIF districts, and how would you feel if they wanted to create more?
I think that using TIF money for economically deprived areas is a win for everybody in the city. So in order to have a successful city, you can't have 80% of it be successful and 20% downright excluded or unsuccessful. So I do believe in using TIF monies for certain areas. Would that mean possible lower tax dollars for the Park District? that's possible. So we would need to look at and make sure that our revenues are staying up, that we're using our money appropriately, and if there's other areas that we need to be fiscally conservative in to make up for the loss of tax dollars, that we are exploring all of those options.
Okay. Do you think vehicles should be allowed to drive through Washington Park? You know, when they do sometimes they shut it down and
Sure.
do the biking, the walking. It's very popular. What do you think
Sure.
of?
You know, I was at the preschool last week, which is pretty well centered in the park. I spend a lot of time at Washington Park when it's nicer out. And so some of those areas are harder to get to, for instance, the playground, when you have children and other things that you may be carrying and kind of lugging around. So I also know that they do close down the roads a lot for 5Ks, 10Ks, walks, benefits, so on. I think that we just need to look and make sure that the areas that need to be accessible, the playground, the tennis court, so on, are accessible. But I think it's inevitable that there will be areas that will be shut down. I'm not for or against vehicle traffic in either way, but I do think that we need to be mindful of both aspects.
I wanted to swing way back to one of your first comments about you thought that people were surprised or unaware that $12.8 million out of a $20 million budget were people stunned by that?
Yes.
Is that way too much? Is that
Well, I think
about
it's
right?
just-
Is that not enough?
I think that they are surprised at the amount. I think people, in my experience speaking with people, they've had a general idea that it's a few $1 million that goes towards the parks, but they don't realize that it's that amount. And so when they do hear that it's that amount, they want to make sure that the money that they work for is utilized properly.
So that it's used properly, not that, oh man, we need to knock that down by half.
Yes, that it's
or
used
anything.
properly more so than just that's too much going towards it.
I'm looking at some of the campaign stuff you brought for us, and you say you believe in better partnerships and wellness programs. Are there areas you see that the Park District can improve on in wellness?
In my current role professionally, I visit a lot of senior fairs, a lot of health fairs, a lot of resource fairs. I help create some of those in areas. And so I think that is something that the Park District could do.
Okay.
I think that the Park District could, we're a medical community, and that medical community wants the best health and wellness for all of us. So I think it's a natural fit with the Park District being recreational, play, healthy living, wellness. I think that it would be a great partnership to partner up with the medical community, and whether it's resource fairs or some of the 5Ks, 10Ks, all of those things that happen, I think that it is a just natural bridge to work together.
So you're talking specifically the hospitals and the med school, or
Yeah, absolutely.
with
Yeah,
this?
with the
Okay.
medical community.
Okay. Well, we thank you for coming in today, Lisa, and meeting with us. I invite you to give a closing statement as to why voters should choose you on Election Day.
I think that one of the most obvious things that has come up over the past week is the preschool in the park. And while I'm not basing my entire campaign on that, or if you should vote for me or not based on that, I think that it's a really good opportunity to point out that conflict isn't always a bad thing. I have my master's degree in conflict resolution. I'm nationally certified in negotiating and mediating. And so I think that people need to realize that conflict can be good. It can spur innovation. It can spur change. It can spur improvement. So I believe that we have a great park system, and I think that anything great can always be improved upon as well. So that is one of the reasons that I'm running, and I hope people will consider voting for me on April 2nd.